Hello and welcome to the Dream Team Professor podcast. My name is Scott and in this episode we're looking at the top players to target in Gameweek 28 Sun Dream Team. Now Gameweek 28 is a Saturday 1:30pm deadline, so ahead of those 3pm kickoffs, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich versus Forest, City versus Brighton and Southampton versus Wolves. It's a single game week this week for everyone except the teams that blank. So Villa and Crystal Palace both have a blank this week. It's Premier League for most, but it is the Carabao Cup final for Liverpool and Newcastle. After Game Week 28, we have an international break as well. So that is going to affect things because I'm looking at Game Week 28 and 29 as a bit of a block during this episode, but there will be a fairly big gap in between, and we know what can happen. Players coming back from long distance flights, injuries during the international break. So there will be a few variables, I think, going into Game Week 29. But Game Week 29 is a double game week of the Premier League and FA Cup quarterfinals. So the main fixture games that we can target for this week and for next week would be Man City, Bournemouth, Fulham, Brighton and Forest. So if we look on the FF Stuff fixture ticker for Game Week 28 and Game Week 29 combined, these teams have 3 fixtures versus everyone else having 2. So City, Bournemouth, Fulham, Brighton, Forest. So let's look at City, Brighton at home, and then Bournemouth in that FA Cup match away from home, and then Leicester at home in Game Week 29, the second fixture. So that looks like a really nice one to target. You've got Bournemouth as well. So obviously they do end up playing City, but they've got 3 home matches in a row. So Brentford, City, and then Ipswich, with City as that FA Cup match. Fulham, I actually don't think Fulham are on my radar. So I've left them out of this episode. But Tottenham at home, Crystal Palace at home, and Arsenal away. I think they look quite tough. Brighton. So Brighton have City away in that Game Week 28 single. So that one doesn't look as good, even though Brighton did get the win in the reverse fixture. And then it's Forest at home, Villa at home, a home double for the FA Cup match, and then the Premier League match. Then we have Forest, and I think they're going to be of interest to some people this week as well. So Forest have got Ipswich away from home in a single this week. So the likes of Chris Wood and a few others that I'm going to mention later could be on the radar. But Game Week 29, Brighton away in the FA Cup, and then Man United at home also looks quite good. I think what's going to happen is you're going to try and target these teams for this week, and then with the intention to hold them in Game Week 29. I think a lot of this episode as well is going to be focused around what we do with the players that blank, because I know a few of you still have Palace players who don't have a fixture this week, but have a really nice double in Game Week 29 of Fulham away and Southampton away. And then a similar scenario with Aston Villa as well. So looking really, really good through to the next round in the Champions League. But blank this week, followed by Preston away and Brighton away in Game Week 29. Now, I thought it was going to be quite straightforward in just remove the blankers this week and get the guys back. But we have had quite a few injuries and things pop up this game week, which might mean holding some of these players looks a bit better. So we will cover that a little bit in this episode as well. Just to update you slightly, so Game Week 30 and 31 will be the European quarterfinals, first and second legs in the Champions League, Europa Conference League. So they've been put into the ticker for Game Week 30 and 31 for the Champions League. So Arsenal doubling with Everton away, Real Madrid at home, followed by Brentford at home and Real Madrid away. And then Aston Villa face PSG. So Liverpool knocked out of the Champions League. So Villa now face PSG. It'll be Nottingham Forest at home and PSG away, followed by Southampton away and PSG at home. So both Aston Villa and Arsenal are going to be of interest. And we could be seeing the likes of Spurs, Manchester United, Chelsea joining those teams pending the results this evening. So that'll be updated after tonight. Let's start looking at some players to target. So we're going to start off with Manchester City, actually. I think they've been off the radar a little bit for the last couple of game weeks, but I think now is a good chance to potentially get them back. So in Game Week 28, it's not the best fixture, Brighton at home, but I feel like this game week is slim pickings. And then Game Week 29, Bournemouth away, Leicester home, does look really nice. But the problem is you can't Well, you can, or you can obviously do what you want, but you don't particularly want to go and target these Man City players in Game Week 29 because most of us have 2 transfers. And I think a lot of us are going to be bringing back in the Palace players and bringing back in the Villa players, which means if you want to get your City players in place to potentially have that nice fixture against Leicester at home or Bournemouth away in the FA Cup, you're probably going to want to make that move this week. So that's why I think City are one of the better teams to target this week. But knowing what City are like, you're always setting yourself up for a little bit of heartbreak with rotation, with a lot of players. But I still think there are some good options to look at. So Brighton home, followed by Bournemouth away, and Leicester at home in 29. I think after that, Game Week 30, Man United away, I think that's the sort of point where we're probably going to look to go back towards the European team. So I think as a 2-week punt, I do like the look of City. And I'll probably end up keeping Haaland for the remainder of the season anyway. But we'll start off with Haaland. So I think he's a captaincy contender in Game Week 28. He did blank against Forest with just the 2-pointer. But I kind of see him as being a must-own in Game Week 29 for that double. I think he's going to be a really nice captaincy pick with Bournemouth away, Leicester home. But I still think he's a contender for Brighton at home as well. So he's returned in 6 of his last 5 matches before Nottingham Forest. So I think he is still going to be a solid pick. He's the penalty taker. I still see City scoring quite a few goals. It's the other end of the pitch that I'm not so convinced by. So I think Haaland still a really good pick, and we'll come on to captaincy, but I still think he's a strong captaincy contender for this Brighton match. Foden, no goal in his last 10, so he really has dipped, and a lot of us took him out recently. 2 assists in those last 10, so he has got a couple of attacking returns. But looking into it, on FF Stuff, again, you can look at all this for free. It's a great way to get your Dream Team data. But there's a bit where you can go to player data by game week. And I was looking at Foden, and you can go through everything. Minutes, attacking returns, shots on target, the lot is on there. I was looking at PPM, what gets you the bonus points. And I feel like he might have been a little bit unlucky. So 4 in his last 10 matches, he'd hit 7 PPM. So only got the 1 bonus point, but was so close to getting the 3. So he is still doing pretty well for bonus. He just fell a little bit short in a couple of the games. So I still think he's a decent option. His minutes are still fairly strong. He's only been benched twice in the last 10 matches. But just recent form with the attacking returns hasn't been so good. Doku is an interesting one. So he's had 90 minutes in the last 3 league matches. Didn't play in the FA Cup match against Plymouth, but I kind of want to disregard the last couple of FA Cup matches because one was against Plymouth, one was against Leyton Orient. We're now sort of down to the quarterfinals, and I think the teams are going to get a bit stronger than what they put out in those rounds. So I'm going to kind of disregard that when it comes to rotation. He's had 8 points, 8 points, and 7 points in his last 3 matches. And in those, he got 3 bonus, and the maximum 5 bonus. So he really is smashing it for the bonus points. And he seems like his minutes have been quite safe lately. Now, we all know City, plenty of wingers, plenty of depth. So that could change. But he does look like he has been a good option over the last few weeks. What is interesting, though, Savinho had been doing pretty well for a few weeks running. But then since Doku returned back to the team, they have been playing together, but Savinho's returns or points have dipped massively, and his bonus points since Doku's return. So it probably does make sense that they're playing heavily down one side through one player, and now Doku's come in. Savinho seems to be doing a little less good for bonus points, but his minutes have still been really strong across sort of the last 8 matches, except again Plymouth. So I think Savinho could also be an interesting option. It's just which one do you go for, or do you go for both? But yeah, I do feel like there is a chance, especially when it's a single game week, you are kind of setting yourself up for a potential benching where it's just a single. In game week 29, it's not so bad because you know you're going to get probably at least 1 out of the 2 matches. And if you're lucky, I think if you look at this as a block, you're probably going to get 2 out of 3. Every City player, probably bar Haaland, and maybe the guy I'm going to talk about next, seem like they could be rotated. So Vardiol, I think, is one of the other ones that could be safe for 3 starts. Now, it does mean a defender transfer, and that could be on a lot of people's minds with Trent Alexander-Arnold now looking like he's injured for the near future, the cup final at least. So Vardiol, is he the only safe option from City for 3 starts? I think he probably is, bar Haaland. But where do we see the clean sheets? Brighton at home. I think Brighton are a nice attacking side, so I expect Brighton to probably score in this game. Bournemouth away in the FA Cup. I do think Brighton scoring that, Bournemouth scoring that. Leicester at home, yeah, maybe. But that's the good thing about Vardiol, that he does get attacking returns. He's right up there for the returns, and he does get bonus points as well. So it isn't entirely relying on clean sheets. If you do want a City player, he's probably going to be one of the more nailed options. I like Marmoush as an option. I said on a couple pods that I kind of feel like I've got unfinished business with him after getting him in, him blanking against Leyton Orient, wasn't it? And then, of course, getting that hat-trick against Newcastle after I'd taken him out. So I kind of do want to go there again. But I was trying to look at it and work out what my team would look like for the next couple of weeks. And if I was to bring in a Marmoush to replace a Watkins, for example, up top, I'm not going to be selling Haaland, and I'm not going to be selling Salah. So if I brought in Marmoush as my 3rd striker, I'm then blocking myself off come game week 29 if I wanted to go for a Mateta. Palace have got nice fixtures. Or even if I wanted to bring Ollie Watkins back for that Preston match. And what is the second one? Brighton away. So I kind of feel like if I go for Marmoush, I am blocking myself off from some other good striker options. So I feel like I'm less inclined to do that. And if I am going to take a punt on one of the City players, it probably is going to be a midfielder or a defender. Bournemouth are going to be interesting for people this week. So 3 home fixtures in a row. The single against Brentford this week, and then the double of City and Ipswich. Bournemouth have been really good at home this season. And having City there, they've even been really, really well against a lot of the top clubs as well. So I do think Bournemouth are going to look a nice one to target. And I think their lineup is fairly predictable, unlike City's. So we'll start off with Kluivert. 5 returns in his last 8 matches. 13 goals, 7 assists for the season. He's having a real breakthrough season in the Prem, I think, this year. An assist against Spurs in that last match, but it could have been so much more, just the 7 points. The only downside is I think he's fine for this Brentford match, and I actually think that's probably one of the best fixtures of the game week. But come game week 29, he hasn't been starting in the FA Cup. And I feel like where it is City, he could either be rotated. Tactically, they might go for something else and go for someone other than Kluivert. But there is also a chance that maybe they focus on that City match, try and beat him and go for Kluivert, and maybe he gets reduced minutes elsewhere. It is a really hard one to predict with him, but all I know is that Kluivert's minutes haven't looked as safe as some of the others when it comes to the Cup. So I do think he's a really good option. And even if you do get just Brentford home and Ipswich home, I think you're still going to be really chuffed with that, with a sub-appearance against City. But it's not perfect. But then I feel like a lot of these options aren't over the next 2 weeks. I've just mentioned pretty much a similar scenario with Savinho or Doku or Marmoush. And I do think Kluivert's just as safe, if not safer, than them for minutes. Someone that does look like he's a minutes monster and is going to be safe for probably all 3 of these fixtures is Semenyo. So 90 plus minutes in all of his last 8 matches, including the FA Cup. Probably not as, or definitely not as explosive as Kluivert, but still has 9 goals, 7 assists for the season. But the attacking returns do seem like they have slowed down a little bit. So 4 returns in his last 8 matches. So I'm confident of 3 starts out of Semenyo. 8th overall for shots on target, 6.3 average as well this season. It's just whether or not you want to go for the lower ceiling but more reliable for starts and minutes player in Semenyo, or just going for the more exciting option, I think, of Kluivert. Maybe you get 70 odd minutes in each game, but you do know with him, he's on the pens, the ceiling's a lot higher. I do feel like the Kluivert option is the one that's a bit more exciting. Evan Nilsson, 2 goals in his last 2 starts, obviously is an option. I've seen a few people ask questions about Evan Nilsson, but for the same reason as Marmoush, I don't feel so pulled towards going for an attacking or striker option, just because I do think it cuts me off in 29, and I think there's some nice striker options in 29. So I don't think it's a bad option, but just think about maybe what you want to do in 29, and does that affect it? Because if you are going to bring a striker in this game week, a Marmoush, an Evan Nilsson, maybe a Chris Wood, you're probably going to hold them, because there's no point taking out a doubler for the week after, I don't think. There is also the threat of Dango. Evan Nilsson has just come back from injury. Kirkes is another one that I've seen his name pop up, and for good reason, because he's having a really good season. Got a lovely assist against Spurs. But he is banned for the FA Cup match against Manchester City. So, I mean, if he was going to miss one of these games, that would be the one that you'd probably prefer to have him playing, or not playing rather. Playing against Brentford and Ipswich looks good, but you're not going to get 3 matches, because with that little, he didn't deserve it either. It was that clash with Cunha, where Cunha basically went for him. Kirkes somehow got booked in that occasion. So Kirkes is banned from the FA Cup match, as is Huijsen, I think that's how you say it, the centre-back from Bournemouth. So they're actually, for that City game, going to be missing their best fullback and arguably their best centre-back, although they have got, it's Zabani who's returning. So they will have a replacement potentially, but still, big loss, Huijsen and Kirkes. And does that mean, or does that make the City wingers a better option potentially, if there is no Kirkes for that match potentially? And of course, Haaland and some of the more attacking players could be better options for Game Week 29 because of that. Brighton have 6 wins on the bounce since their 7-0 loss against Forest. It is a tough fixture, this single against City away from home, but they did win 2-1 in the reverse tie. They're at home for both fixtures of double game week 29. And it does look okay. Nottingham Forest at home, Villa at home. Obviously 2 tough matches, but I think Brighton can hold their own against any side. João Pedro has been fantastic, but it is another striker. And I won't repeat the reason I'm not liking strikers at the minute, but I would really like to have João Pedro for that double game week 29 if it wasn't for some better looking options in my opinion. So 3 goals, 2 assists in his last 4 matches. He has been on and off for starts this season. I've never been able to really catch his hauls. I feel like every time I seem to go for João Pedro, he ends up injured, being rotated. So he's a real frustrating one. But he has had pretty much full minutes in the last 4 matches. He's on pens. I just don't think that first match is ideal. I know I said that I think Brighton will score against City, but I don't see it being a really, really high scoring game. 8 goals, 7 assists for the season for Pedro. I don't mind it. Matoma would be the one that I went for if I went for an attacker, just because he is a mid. I'm not willing to bring in a striker this week. I think he's nailed for 90 minutes a game. 5.3 average is fine as well. He is the highest scoring midfielder for Brighton this season. 8 goals, 4 assists for the season. But he isn't necessarily the most in form when it comes to Dream Team points. I think Minte is the highest scoring Brighton mid across the last 5 game weeks. He's had shots on target for 5 matches running. He's been getting regular tackle points. He does only have a 4.8 average for the season. 6 goals, 5 assists. But he has been, in terms of Dream Team points, the informed guy. So if you want the informed guy, it's probably Minte. But I still feel more comfortable going for Matoma. Rutter is also a strong option. 8 goals, 6 assists for the season. But I think I prefer the other 2. So I mentioned, I think Forest have one of the best fixtures in game week 28, Ipswich away from home. They're off the back of a win against City, that 1-0. They drew against Arsenal as well, so doing well in the bigger games. But they did actually draw 1-1 with Ipswich in game week 26. So if you're thinking this could be a mega haul or a high scoring game, it's not necessarily going to be the case. Although there was a bit of rotation in those FA Cup matches. So maybe this time it's going to be a bit more serious, especially with them trying to get that Champions League place. Chris Wood, so highest scoring player for Nottingham Forest. 18 goals, 3 assists for the season. 4th most goals this season in the game as well. 1 goal in his last 5 though. So it has slowed down a little bit since that hat-trick against Brighton in game week 22. The downside is he hasn't previously started the FA Cup matches, so you'd be pretty sure that he's going to get the Ipswich fixture, There's then the international break where he'll be going away. And then it's Brighton away in the FA Cup. So they've been playing a 1-year up top in the FA Cup. There is a chance they do that again. But where it is now, the quarterfinals, do they just go for it and play Chris Wood? It is a punt. Man United at home in the second match of Game Week 29. I do think that he is going to be a popular option. Actually, let's have a look at the transfers in for the game week to see who's leading at the moment. So Chris Wood is actually top of the list. So Chris Wood currently the most transferred in player for game week 28. You've got Kluivert behind him. Brian Mbeumo actually third most transferred in this game week. So that's a bit of a surprising one. Followed by Bruno Fernandes and followed by Erling Haaland. So Chris Wood looking pretty popular. I don't mind it. I think he could be a differential captain pick as well, but I don't think I'm going to be going there this week. Morgan Gibbs-White, if you're looking for a midfield option, third highest scoring player at Forest, 5.6 average. He also has had reduced minutes in the FA Cup, but again, it's just whether or not you think they're going to go stronger where it's a later round. 5 goals, 9 assists for the season. I actually think if I was going to go for a Forest mid at the moment, it would be Elanga. So I started the season with Gibbs-White actually, but I like the look of Elanga. He's got solid minutes, including the FA Cup recently. Only 1 assist in his last 5 matches in terms of attacking returns, but he is on corners and he seems to be doing quite well for sort of PPM and bonus. So I do like Elanga as a sort of short-term punt in midfield. But again, it's kind of because I don't really want to go for an attacking spot this week. You've got Anya in defence, so second highest scoring player at Forest, 5.4 average, 2 goals, 1 assist for the season. Not the most attacking returns compared to some of the other guys that are in there, but 25 bonus points is a pretty decent return from him. And then you've got Sells as well, so had him for the bulk of the season. And actually, I just wish that I'd probably just kept with him, you know, because I've since leaving Sells and him doing really, really well, I haven't really settled on a keeper, and he's carried on doing really well. So he's got the second most clean sheets in the game, 2 less than David Raya, having played a lot less games. He has now been starting the FA Cup because the reserve keeper that had been playing picked up an injury in one of those games. So since then, he has been playing in the FA Cup matches, and I don't see any reason why that won't carry on. So I think you could do a lot worse than just going for Sells, set and forget for the rest of the season. But it's whether or not you want to try and target one of those Champions League keepers. If you're changing keeper this week, it probably would be Sells. But we know that Raya, we know that Martinez, despite his injury concerns, are still going to be playing in the Champions League for at least another round. If you're enjoying the episode so far, please do leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you're listening on audio platforms, please do give us a follow and leave a review on there. It will help the channel out massively. And don't forget, you can check out the latest episode of the Dream Team Tonic podcast. That is out on all platforms now. Now onto my team, Arsenal. So we've made it through to the Champions League quarter-final and now face Real Madrid. That'll be played across game week 30 and 31. But I wouldn't necessarily be bringing Arsenal players in for this game week because it is just a single against Chelsea in game week 28 and then 29, a home single against Fulham. I only really did an Arsenal slide this week because I just want to celebrate the Declan Rice haul. 18 points and a goal in each game this game week since bringing him in. I got to witness yesterday's goal live in the flesh, home to PSV. A strange game, having been so far ahead in the first leg, but already had my ticket for that one. So Rice, baby, 18 points for the game week. Well chuffed with that, but wouldn't be bringing him in for this game week. David Raya, I think now that we are through in the Champions League to the next round, I know it is going to be a hard double against Real Madrid, but I think if you are looking to make a keeper change, he's still very much on the table. The thing is, for this game week, I don't think we're going to want to move any of our Arsenal players out at all because they have got those extra games coming up. So I think you probably are going to keep all of your Arsenal players. One thought I did have in relation to Arsenal is, could it be worth considering now how we will get back Bukayo Saka if he comes back after the international break? So in game week 28, we've got Chelsea at home. We've then got the international break. And there are sort of murmurs coming out that we are going to try and have Saka ready after the international break. Will it be Fulham at home? Will it be the week after? Everton away? I think we're going to want to try and get him back for those Real Madrid matches, but surely he can't go straight in to a Champions League quarter-final without any matches before that. So maybe he gets a few minutes against Everton or against Fulham in the ones before that. I think the clear path probably will end up being Cole Palmer moving on, or potentially even a Bruno Fernandes, depending on what happens this evening. If one of the Chelsea or Manchester United do end up going out, then I think that will open up to move out a Bruno or a Palmer, potentially to Saka down the line. But just a thought that I'd been having. On to Liverpool. So they have been eliminated from the Champions League by PSG. I think PSG probably did deserve to make it through across the two legs. Now, League Cup final in game week 28 against Newcastle, showing up as a home fixture here, but obviously is at Wembley. No doubles in game week 30 or 31 now, though, so it is going to just be the Premier League for Liverpool till the end of the season. And we have just had the news that Trent, I think he's pretty much ruled out now of the Carabao Cup final. I think they were waiting for more tests, was the latest from Liverpool, but a few of the smaller or news aggregator accounts have sort of said that Trent is going to be highly likely to miss the final. So it looks like Trent could potentially be a transfer out. There is that big international break between game week 28 and game week 29. So there is a possibility that Trent misses Newcastle, but then has that couple of weeks during the international break to recover. And then he might be back for game week 29 against Everton. But now I think there is an argument to potentially hold one of your Aston Villa players, one of your Palace players over Trent, especially the Palace players, because if you think that, let's use Morgan Rogers as an example. I'll just use my example. I've got Rogers and Watkins and I've got Trent. Now, if I took out both of my Villa players, come game week 29, those Villa players will both have a double, whereas Trent only has a single. And if I kept hold of Trent to then find out in game week 29 that actually he's not going to make the Everton game, I feel like that would be a bit of an annoying one. Whereas if I left in a Villa player and come 29, I know that he is going to have that double or potential double. I think there is an argument to maybe get Trent out and then keep a Villa player over him. I'll talk a bit more about it at the end because that is the similar scenario to I'm in. So when I do my team update, I can talk to you about my thoughts on that. But yeah, it's looking like it might actually be worth moving Trent out. And then if he's back, we can bring him back. But if not, you don't have to worry about it so much. I can see it being one of those ones where we don't get news until the very last minute, and then it could end up in disappointment. Mohamed Salah, I think, still a season hold, even without the extra competitions. He's just been too good this season. 120 minutes in that last game. 2 blanks in 4 games. Is he still the best captain in game week 28? We'll have a chat about that in a minute. But there could be an argument that he's got a lot of minutes in the legs. Mate, where's his head out? Maybe it could be an opportunity to go against him. But it is a dangerous one. He'll be definitely staying in my side. We've got Alisson, 7 saves across 7 saves against PSG this match, and 8 points for the game week, even though no clean sheets. So I think bringing Alisson in for me worked out fairly well. But again, nothing official, but we have seen a few of the Liverpool news pages say that it's very likely that Kelleher is going to play the Carabao Cup. So for me, that's another potential blanker in my team. I could have Trent injured, I could have Alisson benched for Kelleher, and 2 Villa players. So again, it's going to be a bit of a headache. Definitely don't be bringing in Alisson for this game week specifically. McAllister, impressive game week, 10 points with no attacking returns, bonus tackles, and the corners just really getting his points up. So really good option potentially for going forward, but again, no extra games. I just think in general, it could just be a chance to reduce our Liverpool numbers now. So Salah, I think obviously is going to be a hold for the rest of the season. Trent potentially in that conversation if he's fit. But I do think the players like Virgil van Dijk and some of those midfielders probably not going to be needed as much without the extra games. 3 wins in a row for Chelsea, Southampton, Copenhagen and Leicester. The main talking point really is Palmer a keep or a sell? That's one that kept coming up when we were talking on the Dream Team Tonic podcast at the start of the week. The fixtures aren't great. So Game Week 28, it is just an away single against Arsenal. Not a great game at all. Game Week 29, Spurs at home. You can imagine there's a fair few goals in that match. But again, a few players off it at the moment. I do think that Palmer's form has been concerning. But I just think that if your team's anything like mine, having Cole Palmer for an extra game week in a tough fixture is the least of my worries and probably your worries. If you've got 2-3 blankers in your team at the minute, just keep Palmer with a fixture, even though it's a bad fixture. And we can worry about that in the later game weeks. No goals since game week 19, just 2 assists in that time. Maybe he delivers this evening. But it has been a concern. I just don't think it's one we need to fix right away. Cucurella, 3 returns in his last 3 matches, could potentially be an option if they get through to the next lot of rounds in Europe. 15 points, 6 points and 18 points in his last 3 games. But I don't think Game Week 28 or 29 really look like clean sheet fixtures. So I think we'll be looking more like Game Week 30 or 31. And Aston Villa, so even though they blank, we're going to talk about them anyway. So definitely don't be buying them this week. But do we hold? So no fixture this week. But Game Week 29 is away at Preston and away at Brighton. Asensio and Martinez were missing from the last Premier League game, but came back for Club Bruges and both returned. So Martinez, clean sheet against Bruges, and Asensio. You'd have had such mixed emotions this week if Asensio was in your team. You'd have been absolutely gutted for that first fixture to see that he was missing after the great week he had previously. But then yesterday, to come off the bench and score 2 goals, he hit the post as well. It just looks so dangerous. Those little runs in behind. I can't say that I'd watched a load of Asensio. I knew he was a great player, but I hadn't really sort of watched him on a weekly basis like we've seen him here. And he's just looking so good for Villa. 5 goals in 7 games. I think I saw that's makes him the most informed player at the moment for goals in the Premier League or from the Premier League clubs. Watkins off with an injury. I don't think it sounded serious. I didn't get to watch the full game of this one, just the highlights, because I was obviously at the Arsenal match. But see that he went off after 45 minutes with just a 2-pointer. So we'll have to wait for a few more updates on him. But Emery did say that he wasn't feeling great, so he subbed him off. I wasn't initially going to hold blank players this week with Watkins and Rodgers. Obviously, I've just touched upon maybe taking Trent out ahead of them, though, because that Game Week 29 double does look nice. Preston away and Brighton away from home. And I just think that if I was to say keep hold of Rodgers, I feel like he's quite likely to get that double in Game Week 29. And does Rodgers outscore Trent in Game Week 29? Probably. I think you're probably in the same boat if you've got Asensio. I think you're probably not going to want to take him out now, the form that he's been in. So 17-pointer against Club Bruges. I imagine the likes of Rodgers and Asensio are probably the 2 that would stay for a lot of teams. I do think Watkins potentially could be moved on. We'll have to keep an eye on what his latest injury status is. But again, it's whether or not you want Watkins for Game Week 29. If you're set on having Watkins for Game Week 29, you could probably go and keep him. But if you have got your eyes on maybe bringing a Mateta in or bringing in a different striker for that game week, maybe it could be worth moving a Watkins to a midfielder or a defender and then making that decision the week later. Captaincy for Game Week 28. So is it a week to go against Mohamed Salah? So he's had 2 blanks in his last 3 matches, although 2 of those matches were PSG, so were really tough games. 9 points and 19 points in his 2 matches against Newcastle so far this season. So it is a fixture he's done pretty well in. And they are also without Lewis Hall. So I think that could be a plus for Mohamed Salah as well. So I think he is still a really strong option. You could say that played 120 minutes, could have taken its toll on Salah or the mental side of things. But he is still an elite player. The highest scoring player on Dream Team. 32 goals, 22 assists for the season. Whatever time you take on Salah, it's never a very great experience, is it? It's never a nice one to do. But I do think you could go for it this week. I think Haaland versus Brighton is another good option. So 6 returns in his last 5 matches. But again, He blanked against Forest in the previous match. I think Forest, though, I just think that matchup was quite good for them. So obviously sticking the big centre-backs, marking Haaland, playing quite a deep block, counter-attack football. I don't think Brighton will play that same way. So I still think Haaland could be a decent option for that Brighton match. 28 goals, 4 assists. And then when you look at Gameweek 29, I think Haaland is probably going to be the standout captain for that one. So this week, I think Haaland, a nice option to maybe take Salah on. I think Bruno Fernandes, we'll obviously see what he does this evening, but 12 goals, 15 assists for the season, and now up against Leicester away from home could be a nice one. He's had double-digit returns in 4 of his last 5 matches before tonight's game. So again, Bruno Fernandes, a nice differential. Or I said a few times in this episode that I didn't want to go for a striker this week, but if you were going for Chris Wood against Ipswich, if you're backing him in your team, I think he's a decent one to back for captaincy as well. 18 goals, 3 assists for the season. I just don't think he's got as many route to points as a Mohamed Salah, for example. And you don't really see, I know they're playing Ipswich, but I don't see, probably bar the Nottingham Forest Brighton match where they scored 7. I don't see Forest as a team that has a ton of shots and scores a ton of goals, whereas you do feel like City, Liverpool have got that in them. If you're going for an extra differential that's not on the list, just let us know in the comments below. All right, quick team update for Gameweek 28. Obviously, the Europa League matches, Europa Conference League matches still to come. So I'll have, is it just Palmer? Palmer and Bruno Fernandes, hopefully still to play. It's been a green arrow so far, but obviously that could still change. 112th to 85th last night. So back in the top 100. Hopefully I can stay there. 121 points for the game week. 3,587 for the season. So this week I took out Porro for Virgil van Dijk. Currently, Virgil van Dijk is 2 points ahead. But if Porro does start this evening, I imagine Porro will end up overtaking Virgil. So maybe not the best move, but I was just a little bit worried about Porro's minutes or starts. He'd been getting rotated a fair bit recently. And with some single game weeks coming up as well, I didn't want to take the chance that he could be a did not play for the next game week, especially in a week where I was already going to have Aston Villa players not playing. And I've already acquired a Trent now that's probably going to blank, and also Alisson. So I didn't want to take that chance that I was going to have an additional player not play. So I'm still happy with that decision, no matter how that goes. And now I took Phil Foden out. He's on 3 points, and I replaced him with Declan Rice, who came away with, it says 10 points there, but he came away with 18 points, Declan Rice. So actually not 9 points up, I'm 17 points up currently with that Declan Rice back-to-back goals. Now the Rice transfer obviously has been very jammy, obviously has worked out very nicely with back-to-back goals. Did not see that coming at all. The reason I brought Declan Rice in is because I did think there was a really good chance that he would start both games. I know people disagreed, but I think the team that I thought would be played last night, bar maybe Zinchenko coming in and Bar Tierney coming in at left wing, was pretty much what I'd expected would happen. So it was more of a volume play with Rice. He seems to do okay, sort of tick along, getting sort of 5 points per game. And I told myself I'd be happy to come away with sort of 10 points for the game week. But of course, 18 points, I was chuffed with that. Definitely seeing it live as well was much, much better. Made a game more exciting that otherwise probably wasn't the most exciting game to be at. Alisson, 8 points. So without the clean sheets, he's done well for me getting points. Gabriel, bit disappointing, but did play both. Virgil van Dijk, 5. And then Trent with the 11 points, which is a good return without clean sheets. But now, after picking up that injury against PSG, probably sounds like he's going to miss the Carabao Cup final. Cole Palmer still to play tonight. Morgan Rogers grabbed an assist yesterday, still looking really dangerous. Bruno Fernandes, 13 points for that free kick goal against my side, Arsenal. And Declan Rice, 18. Ollie Watkins, 12 points for the week. Not a bad return, but again, gone off at half-time with what looks like an injury. I think he could be one to go this week. Haaland, 2 points. Now, I didn't want to take Haaland out for this Nottingham Forest game because he stung me. Every time I've gone against him in a game that looks tough, he has stung me this season. But of course, that's the game that I went for him and kept him in. Didn't do the business, did he? But I want him for this week and I wanted him for next week. So I think it made sense to keep hold of him. And then Salah, 38 points still with the armband on. So decent enough captaincy pick this week. So main fires this week, Alisson, not going to play. I'm willing to just, well, it's not confirmed that he's not going to play, but we think Kelleher is going to play. But I'm just going to keep Alisson in there. I think he's going to play the majority of the season. Maybe I'll move it on to a Champions League keeper or a Europa League keeper down the line, but I don't think it's a pressing concern at the minute. Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously with that injury doubt, and then Rodgers and Watkins blanking in game week 28, but having nice fixtures or a nice double in 29. So on to my decisions then for ins and outs this game week. So Trent and an Aston Villa player seems the most likely outcome for me, and then leaving one Aston Villa player in for that game week 29 double. I'm thinking Trent and probably Ollie Watkins are going to go, mostly because I know that at the moment Morgan Rodgers doesn't have any injury concerns, but of course that could very well change after the international break. But as it stands, I think it probably would be Trent and Watkins out for me. I've got the flexibility then. If I do want another striker in that's not Watkins, I can do that, or I can just bring Watkins back if we hear that he is completely fine and he is going to be available for 29. With Trent, I'd probably replace him with a Vardiol. I think that would probably be the most sensible option. But the only downside is I kind of in my head had Munoz coming in for game week 29 double. And if I bring in Vardiol, he's obviously going to want to stay for his double. And that would mean going to a 4 at the back, which isn't the end of the world, but it doesn't seem the most exciting for game week 29. So that is one kind of downside. If I was to keep Trent in and take my two Villa players out, I probably would end up just trading Trent for Munoz the week after. But if I take him out this week, I'm probably going to end up with bringing two defenders in 2 weeks. In terms of the midfield / attacking options, I do really like the look of City this week. So obviously I said if I take Trent out, I probably will bring in Vardiol. But I do feel quite sort of pulled towards going towards one of those City wingers or midfielders in Savinho or Doku. Foden obviously could also be on the table. I just have that feeling that I could end up shooting myself in the foot for game week 28 and potentially getting a bench in. That's always a risk with City, but I think I'd have to look at it as sort of playing 2 out of the next 3 fixtures would be a positive. So if I went for a Rodgers or Watkins, or Rodgers and Watkins out, I could potentially do a Doku and Savinho transfer in and leave Trent in there and then replace Trent with Munoz. But I think the safer option might just be go Vardiol, be quite confident that he's going to get 3 starts, and then take a punt with that midfield slot, maybe one of Savinho or Doku. If I start to get cold feet on one of those City midfielders, I think they're not going to start that game, or we don't get any leaks, I could just go safer and maybe go for one of the Bournemouth players. I think they're my sort of second favourite options. Maybe a Kluivert, maybe a Semenyo. Kluivert if I want the higher upside, or Semenyo if I just want to make sure I'm getting those minutes in. We'll obviously see how this evening goes with all those extra games to take place, but I think if anything drastic does happen, my hands are going to be kind of tired anyway, because I've already got a couple of blankers in there. So we'll see what Palmer does. We'll see what Bruno Fernandes does this evening. But yeah, if you've got any questions going into Game Week 28, as always, drop them in the comments below and I'll get back. And do head over to the Dream Team Tonic podcast for our latest episode on YouTube or audio platforms. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.